In lieu of the Iran war going on forever and ever, today on the show, actually wanted to touch on one of my heartfelt subjects and stay away from the politics for the most part. And that is the start of the Major League Baseball season here in the US, and more specifically about my New York Yankees. So, without any further gibbering on, I'm your host, Sal Assante. This is the We The Patriots podcast, and let's get right into the show today. So, baseball is back. Like I said, I'll touch a little bit on what I think is going to go down with Iran later, but really for now, I think it's quite obvious that this thing is not going to be over tomorrow or the next week. So we got some time on that. We could talk all next show or the shows after that about it. And right now, it's baseball season, and at least we have a little bit of a fun outlook to talk about. So why not discuss it? Baseball is back, and there has been a major change in the game if you have been following. If not, I am sorry. This might be the show that you want to skip, and that's just okay with me. Baseball, I mean, for those of you that know me, you know that baseball is probably my favorite sport growing up, and even to this day, I love following it. I don't care what team I'm watching. As long as I'm watching a game, it is enjoyable to me. Played up until my first year of college, and then I decided to go work for a living, so that's fine. But yes, been around the game, know a lot about the game, coached a lot of the game, and it is fun to finally be back in season after the World Baseball Classic. The regular season is back, and there is a big change in the game. So with that change, we are looking at not quite robot umps, but damn close. It's called the assisted ball strike system. What that means is that teams have two challenges every single game to use on the ball and strike calls. Every single stadium in the MLB has now a setup that is, from my understanding, set up so that the plate is covered. That's going to be the same on every batter. And then it goes from the bottom of the knee to the top of the belt. Now, people that may want to argue against the system have a few different points. I'm going to talk about both sides of the coin and what I think about it. But really, if you are to look at the rule book of baseball, one of the issues that people are going to have is that in the rule book, states pretty clearly that the strike zone goes from the knees to the bottom of the armpit shoulder area. I don't know the exact verbiage, but basically it's to your nipple line. And that obviously that strike zone is not possible to be upheld. It hasn't been upheld for as long as I remember. I don't think it's really ever been upheld. Generally speaking, once it gets to Major League Baseball and even all the way down to about probably the high school level, the strike zone is about at the top of the belt. Anything higher than that, especially at the velocities that pitchers are throwing nowadays, is impossible to hit. So that's about where the top of the zone theoretically should be, and that's where the ABS system is calling strikes at the top of the zone, is at that top of the belt line. Now, you have an argument, and I think it's very fair that it is not to the rulebook standards, and I think that people have a very valid argument against that. One thing that we saw teams doing going into the season was correcting all of the height data, because I believe that height data is put into the system in order to calculate the size of the strike zone for each batter. So you saw people like that are on that fringe of a 6 foot that are, maybe 5'10", 9, but they wear their spikes that might be closer to 6 foot. They'll be listed as 6 foot. Now you're seeing teams actually state their correct height at whatever it is, 5'10", 5'9", whatever. Whole point being is that I believe that data has to be input into the system in order to properly calculate their strike zone. Now, you would think that every single hitter is different. Their stance is different. Technically, when you're looking at the strike zone, it is where the stance is at the time of release. So I don't really know how the height factors in, but I'm not behind the engineering of the system. I have no idea the actual workings of it. So whatever. It was interesting to see a bunch of teams correcting their heights on their published data on their players. So that's one gripe that people are going to have. Another gripe that people have, and honestly, I'm one of them, is that in this ball strike system with the automated assistance, it does not matter how much of the ball is touching the strike zone. It is considered a strike. Now, an umpire may have made a borderline call. We'll say that the pitch, this is the bottom of the strike zone. The pitch just nicked the bottom of it. So it really does appear pretty low, and the umpire is calling it a ball. And those are coming back as strikes. I don't want to say I have a major issue with it. All I'm saying is that unfortunately is going to be a part of what it is moving forward with these automated calls. And it's going to be something that hitters and pitchers alike are going to have to start to deal with, because there's going to be calls that used to be almost guaranteed balls that are going to be strikes. And there's going to be calls that were almost guaranteed strike calls that are going to be balls. So that's going to be an interesting workaround. At the end of the day, there really can't be a gray area. And that's kind of what the system is getting away from. You know, the human element is something that exists in all sports and truly is what makes sports amazing. When you have that player who nobody really knows the name of is all of a sudden the hero of the World Series, of the Super Bowl, that's what everybody comes to see. But the human element also comes together in the refereeing, the umpiring of sports. And what baseball is doing is getting away from that human element to an extent. Now, again, you are limited to 2 challenges unless you get them correct. And the same goes for challenges in the field. So you have both kind of there. What is going to be really interesting for me watching throughout the season is there are certain umpires that have, say, a tendency to be quote unquote hitter friendly or quote unquote pitcher friendly. What that means, of course, if you're hitter friendly, the strike zone is generally small. And if you're pitcher friendly, the strike zone is generally big. Now, with this system, so long as you're limiting the challenges as a team, if you can get your team to buy into this, so long as you're limiting the challenges to be allowed to be done by, I guess, hitters that really know the strike zone, but more so allowing the catchers really to do all of the challenging. At that point, as long as the catcher is understanding of where that ABS system box is going to be, they should have a damn near 100% success rate in their challenges. And what it'll be really interesting for me to follow throughout the season is if these home plate umpires are going to change their zones that they've been calling for X number of years, possibly decades, to try to be more accurate in their strike zone calls. And the reason that I bring this up is because something that's become very popular over the past couple of years has been umpire scorecards. Now, these are not actually official. These are put out, I believe, by a Twitter account that could also be a web at this point. But all in all, what it is grading out how often an umpire is correct based on the relevant data. And there are certain umpires that are generally around the 95+% correct rate, and that would be considered fantastic. There is also umpires that are closer to a 90 to high 80% correct mark. And when you look at it over the course of a season, that is a tremendous amount of calls that are going to be incorrect. So, again, it's going to be really interesting to me to see if umpires are going to acquiesce to the strike zone to try not to look that bad. Because at the end of the day, when you're getting challenged constantly, like, for instance, there was a game with the famous umpire. Anybody who doesn't know baseball has already turned off this conversation at this point, and I apologize to you guys, but next week's show will hopefully be for you. But again, there was a game yesterday. I believe it featured the Cincinnati Reds and maybe, I don't even know who they were playing. Doesn't really matter. All I know is that CB Buckner, who is a notoriously terrible umpire, was umpiring the game. And he got embarrassed twice in a row in the same at-bat, trying to ring up a strike 3 call on Eugenio Suarez, and got called out twice. And you could tell by the body language, you could tell by the way that he was articulating, even though he went through the motions and called for the challenge, he was visibly upset, and even went so far as the first call was really close. It was a tough call, and any umpire would get that wrong. Maybe not 100% of the time, but any umpire could get that wrong. And the next call was, more than an inch outside, was pretty clearly an outside pitch. And it looked like Buckner was trying to get retribution for the challenge that was just posed on the last pitch. And he rung him up again, and he got challenged again. And you could see the frustration visibly. The physical signs were there that he was frustrated. You hear it in his voice that he was frustrated, and he got called out again for being wrong. And truly, that's a humiliating circumstance to go through. Are these umpires going to get sick of being humiliated and change their zone? I don't. It's going to be interesting to kind of see throughout the game. Now, I'll call out the exact opposite example. So in the Yankees and Giants game yesterday, the culmination of a 3-game series, the umpire, and you can kind of get these tendencies if you watch enough baseball, but the umpire was positioning himself on the inner half. So anytime that there was a right-handed batter, he was on that right-hand side of the screen. Anytime there was a left-handed batter, he was on that left-hand side of the screen. So what that meant was that whenever there was a call on the outer half to a batter, didn't matter if it was righty or lefty, he was missing a lot of those calls, and most of them were going the batter's way. So a pitch that was pretty clearly on the corner of the strike zone on the outer half was getting called a ball and was getting challenged by both sides and was coming back as, yes, that is actually a strike, helping out the pitcher, therefore. That would be one of those examples of a hitter's umpire to an extent, right? So when he has full clarity of that inside half, but he's losing that outer half. But over the course of the game, he started to realize he was getting challenged a lot on those pitches. So he was opening up his strike zone a little bit on that side. Now, whether he's actually seeing those pitches or he's making assumptions is another conversation, but that was an example of an umpire that pretty clearly to me was making an adjustment based on what the ABS was. And I can only assume that that was the first game that he had gone through with the ABS challenge system in place. So with that being said, I think that there's a good chance that a lot of umpires are going to start adjusting their zones. Now, what I also would not really be surprised to see is that after this year and possibly after the strike zone gets implemented a little bit heavier, or there is an automated strike call without the umpire getting involved, my guess is that a lot of these older umpires that are nearing retirement age, that have their tenure, I don't know what tenure, if there is tenure in the umpires union, I can only assume you're going to see a lot of them retiring, I think. And I think that that's just going to happen regardless of if the system moves forward or if it stays where it's at right now. But I think that's something to look out for as well. But really, I think that this system it's a good step moving forward. The only thing that's really not going to be able to be implemented in baseball going throughout all of the levels of play is really the strike zone system. So it's interesting to me that you're not really going to see this until you get to, I believe it's not in place until you get to AA. I could be wrong on that, but they did this testing. That's how they came up with this system. It's going to affect the game. Without a doubt, it already has affected the games. Things that never would have happened have already happened. That's going to continue to happen. So something to be on the lookout for is just how low level this really gets. It's not feasible whatsoever to have robot umpires for a 10U baseball game, but does it get down to the high school level as, you know, scouts and team development wants to see the hitters dealing with actual strikes when they're hitting, and even on the reverse, that pitchers are pitching to a true strike zone and aren't benefiting from wild umpires who like calling strikes 6 inches off the plate. It's going to be interesting. Keep your eyes out on that if you're a baseball fan. Again, if you're not a baseball fan, you already tuned out, I'm assuming. So we're about 12, 15 minutes into this conversation. And I really think that the idea of the assisted ball strike system and not fully automated is going to be just a stepping stone, is my guess. Eventually, it's probably going to be fully automated. Now, you still need a home plate umpire. You still need someone to make out and safe calls. You need people that are going to attempt at least to identify whether there was catcher's interference. For those of you that don't know, that is when the batter is swinging and he hits the catcher's mitt. That is automatically ruled as a hit in the books. You have a bunch of different things that the job of a home plate umpire is never going to fully go away. That being said, I would not be surprised that with the next CBA negotiation that is to come this following year, that automated ball strike is going to take over rather than assisted ball strikes. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Another thing in baseball to look out for, of course, is what I just mentioned there, that CBA negotiation that's going to be coming at the end of this season. My assumption is that it's going to be a pretty knockdown and drag out CBA. There are a lot of very smart people, intelligent people that are way smarter than me that are involved in the executive part of baseball that are saying that there's probably going to be a lockout. To what extent, they don't know. Gonna have to be on the lookout, right? Because there's a lot of things that are going on. You have both inequality in the highest level of paid players and the rookies that are coming up. That's always existed, but with these giant contracts that are coming out, you think of a Juan Soto, you think of a Shohei Ohtani, these really massively successful players and their contracts, and then you look at a rookie contract that's something like $800,000 a year, you have a very large disparity in that and people wanting to get paid. And you also have a massive discrepancy in terms of the amount of money that teams are receiving for their rights as a team, for their name and likeness, as well as their TV rights locally. When you think of the different options out there, right? So you have the New York Yankees, for example, and they have their Yes Network, or is more commonly known nowadays as the Gotham Sports Group. They have their own TV deal. They still make money off that. Now, do they make as much money as they did 15 years ago? Not even close because of the streaming stuff, but they still do have money coming in. Whereas, for example, a team like the Washington Nationals, who have now lost their right to their local TV provider, are now a part of the MLB network program, and they are getting a much less payout, far less of a payout than teams with their own local revenue. And then you have, of course, the outlier that is the Dodgers, that has a deal with Warner Bros. I believe that is something like paying them out. I want to say like something like $300 million over an 8 or 10 year span. Just an astronomical advantage specifically for that team. And that is the one outlier. Nobody else has that good of a deal of guaranteed money coming in. Even someone who is like the Yankees with their Yes Network is still only profiting as much as that network, that streamer, is profiting. Whereas the Los Angeles Dodgers have a deal in place, and that is part of the reason they're able to afford as much as they do in terms of new player contracts every single year. It's going to be interesting moving forward because the MLB's plan pretty clearly is to have the rights owned wholly by MLB and then to sell those off, or to make it so that you have to subscribe to something like the MLB Watch app. I forget the name of it now. MLB TV, maybe. Their goal pretty clearly is to get all teams on that, and that's going to be a big issue when it comes to negotiations as well. You also have the idea floating out there that people in ownership want a salary cap, which coincides with the salary floor. That's going to be a whole nother issue as well. And you have other issues like player health, throwing hard past their abilities. All of this stuff continually comes up over and over again. And last but not least is going to be MLB team expansion and whether the MLB wants to push that. Basically, whenever that happens, every single team gets a massive payout. They have a huge buy-in that is split with the 30 teams. However, with the national revenue that comes in from games like the All-Star Game, the World Series, stuff like this, that's going to be split with an extra 2 teams, presumably. And that's going to be arguments that are coming up in the CBA. I think it's going to be very interesting for baseball fans and business people, business-minded people, to pay attention and see how that negotiation goes, because it's going to be a real marking point for the future of the professional sport of baseball. Now, with all that aside, that's about all I got for the baseball. I hope that the Yankees continue their trajectory and go 162-0, even as impossible as that is. I know that's not going to happen, but hey, one can hope. Going 3-0 against San Francisco, a pretty well put together team, and their new college manager not doing his best work over there. Hope the Yankees continue their run, because it's been fun to watch, other than Aaron Judge looking like he has no idea what he's doing out there at the plate. Anyway, that's all I got on the baseball stuff. I did just want to touch on what's going on in Iran quickly, even though I think that these two audiences don't collide too much. But basically, the reason that I'm not covering it this week is that it's pretty obvious to me that there's going to be a pretty long and drawn out process. From what it looks like, the U.S. and Israeli operations are continuing to escalate. Iran is not backing down. They're continuing to escalate on their side. And, any talk of Trump saying that they are negotiating, they have someone they're negotiating with, it seems like is folly coming from the Iranian side. They do not have any knowledge. If you're going to trust them, they do not have any knowledge of any negotiations happening. And it does not seem like they want to. So, with that said, the musings that keep coming out are that we are preparing for ground troops. I believe that Marines have already been sent over there. There is continued troop support being sent over to the Middle East, and all things point to some sort of ground force being employed. And for that reason, this conflict is not really going to go anywhere. With all of that said, we're going to have tons of time to talk about Iran, so I wanted to focus on baseball today. Number one, Been talking about Iran a lot lately, and I think you guys are all hearing that from all sorts of different places. You don't need to hear the same stuff from me. And number two is that sometimes it's nice to focus on some things that are a little more upbeat. And to me, baseball is one of those things, even if maybe I just dragged us through the mud on it, talking about CBA negotiations and how umpires are going to start retiring and stuff like that. No, I think it's still fun to talk about. I think it's very interesting. And at the end of the day, when you look at how much baseball has coincided with the rise of us as a country and now a quote unquote empire, baseball is really a true bona fide part of our past, our pastime, and our history as a nation. So I think it's important to talk about that as well, especially with me being a baseball fan. So that's about all I got for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If the show was not for you, but you stuck it out, I really appreciate you. If you really love baseball, you want me to talk more about it, let me know. I don't think I'll include it too much on this show, but every now and then I have something I want to talk about, like robot umpires. So that's all I got for you guys today. Next week, we will probably be back on the news cycle to some degree or another, but we'll see what happens. Maybe something crazy will come out of these robot umpires. Catch you all guys next week. Next week is Easter, so I hope you all have a lovely Easter. Hope you get to spend some time with family, even if you are not celebrating. I hope that family is a part of your life around this time of year. It is a beautiful time of year. The springtime is rolling around. We're starting to finally warm up here in New Jersey. I hope it is the same by you. I love you all. Have a very good week, and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace out.
I wish I were the fucking state. I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.